Hello folks, welcome to the program. My name is Michael Turton. I'm sitting here with Donovan Smith, and we're going to talk about this week's developments in Taiwan politics.
Alright, so why don't we kick off? Hanguoyu, because I'm sure you haven't got enough coverage of Hanguoyu yet. There has been a computer engineer came out with a program that I believe it's an app you can install on your browser, I believe Chrome, which can remove all of your Facebook notifications regarding Hanguoyu, which may or may not be symptomatic of his possible decline. He's been falling off in the polls recently, and of course in his recently he's come out and openly said that if he were not included in the KMT primary, he would be disappointed, so he's pretty much all but in the race. So what's your take on what's going on?
My take is the same as Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je. Han is 100% political. It's, I don't know if the public is going to accept him leaving a city that he's never actually been the mayor of to run for an office that he has no preparation whatsoever for.
Wait, preparation for office? What is this you speak of?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, no, obviously Hanguoyu has a problem with preparation for the office, obviously. And his nickname recently that people have been using for him, Cao Bao.
Cao Bao?
Yeah, for being empty straw man, for lacking substance. So all right, we're going to come back to Hanguoyu a little bit in a minute. But in general, the KMT, why don't you kick this one off?
Well, in general, what Tsai Ing-wen has done, and what the Rise of China has also done, is pulled the KMT into an ever more pro-China spiral. And the positions that it's been advocating for this election, all the candidates, for example, have discussed some kind of peace agreement or the 30-year peace treaty, which goes back to Sung Tu-yu, James Song's proposal from the 2000 election to have a 50-year peace treaty with China, as if they could ever sign that. You also see, well, there's Han saying he's going to set up the free enterprise zones in Kaohsiung, which had been first mentioned under the Ma Ying-jeou administration as a way to bring in Chinese products, process them in extraterritorial zones in Taiwan, and then ship them out. But really in the KMT plan, the idea was to bring in Chinese labor to take care of that, and also to taint Taiwan products. As Chinese materials would come in, of course they would be smuggled in Chinese products. One of the problems that we've had as we've gotten closer to China with the ECFA agreement is that there's been an increase in smuggling. And of course, free enterprise zones with tons of stuff coming in ready to be processed would just exacerbate this problem. So you can see how this would tend to start tainting Taiwanese products, since they would be incorporating Chinese materials into them, which, as we all know, are high-quality materials, admired all around the world for their attention to detail and careful preparation. That probably doesn't work very well. Maybe we should do that again. I'm talking too fast.
No, it's fine. I'd also add that, I think part of the reason the KMT is moving more pro-China is I think that they overestimate what's going on after the last local election. The last local election, I think a lot of them felt that there was a surge of pro-ROC nationalism and a much more pro-China approach. But if you look at most of the polling, or pretty much all the polling out there on identity, which has come down a few points on Taiwanese identity, 2-3 points, not very much, not significant. The percentage of the population that's against one country, two systems has continued rising significantly. Yeah. And so essentially, I think that the KMT is misreading the results from the local elections late last year as indicating that the public has a strong appetite to move closer to China, and that is a winning ticket for the KMT. And I think that a lot of the candidates think that's a winning ticket because Hanguoyu did this, but I'm not sure that actually has much truth to it, as much or anywhere near as much as they think it does. What's your take on that?
I would tend to agree with that. I would also argue that they're empty of policies because Tsai has co-opted so many of the good ones. The southward move, getting closer. They can't get closer to Japan because that would be ideologically wrong, and they're essentially opposed to the U.S. support of Taiwan. So really, what are they stuck with? Turning to China, and all of their policies are going to reflect that. They also lack a good lock on progressive policies. For example, at the recent gay marriage vote, the KMT legislators basically all voted against it.
Except for 6 or 7.
Yeah, there's only a tiny handful, and that was a bad move because the KMT cannot now position itself as, hey, we're doing progressive things, but we're doing them in a different way. We can't move back to the left, and they're going to find themselves in a smaller and smaller space policy-wise.
Now, here's something that was interesting that Frozen Garlic brought up. Is he commented? Now, I noticed that there was 7 out of the 35 KMT legislators voted on Article 4 on the marriage equality bill, which is the key one.
Right.
That specified specifically that it doesn't matter your gender, you can get married. But he noted that Johnny Chang, Jiang Jitsun, voted against. And that Wayne Chang, Jiang Wanan, voted for. And so his comment was that Wayne Chang, who is of course the great-grandson of Chiang Kai-shek, and considering a rising star of the party, he voted for. And Johnny Chang, who's also considered another rising star in the party, voted against. Now his comment was that he thought that Wayne Chang was looking more forward, assuming that he's on a track, but potentially to be mayor of Taipei, which is definitely a possibility.
Right.
I think he's spot on there. I think he was also spot on that would put him in line be a prospective presidential candidate going even further down the line.
Correct.
And I think these kind of calculations are certainly going on in his mind. But the part that I think that he didn't mention, and I think is very interesting, is I have the sneaking suspicion that Johnny Chang, or Jiang Jitsun, from here in Taichung, I think that he may have made the shrewder calculation in that he's thinking more in terms of what needs to happen for the survival of the party in the short term. And because the KMT has been under a lot of pressure in the last few elections, except for the last one.
Right.
They're ideologically adrift.
Yeah.
But the last election cycle, it was Wang Jinping and unified all the factions. And if you look at the electoral map on where the KMT won, that was a factional win. It was the factions, the KMT factions were brought back together, the patronage factions. They were unified in a way they'd never been unified before, and they did it, I can only assume, because they realized that their very existence is potentially at stake with the DPP administration phasing out the irrigation associations are being nationalized.
Yep.
And they know what's coming next is if the DPP wins this next election, they're gonna nationalize the agricultural and fishing associations, and that's just going to cripple the patronage factions where they distribute their large, their largesse.
That's been a DPP goal.
And so Wang Jinping, for the first time ever, significantly brought together basically all of the factions and all of the rural areas across Taiwan in a way that we've never seen before in the last election. I think this is a big story that has really not been covered well. And so I think that Johnny Chang, what he's doing is he's looking at what's going to win these people, what's going to keep them unified, what's going to keep the party unified going into the next election cycle so that the party stays viable long term. So I actually think that Johnny Chang was the more visionary one in terms of the KMT to survive longer term needs to survive strongly in the short run. Because they finally, in the last local election, got themselves some viable candidates because they were bereft of talent after the 2016 election.
Right.
They had almost no one left. And they cultivated Wang Chang, and then out of the blue, Han Guoyu, Johnny Chang, Lu Xiuyan, Wang Huimei out of Zhanghua, and Hou Youyi in New Taipei
City, yeah.
I think Hou Youyi is a legitimate talent. I think Johnny Chang is a legitimate talent. It really remains to be seen. Liu Xiaoyan is so far not faring very well in the polls, or at least politically there seems to be a lot of blowback. And so it remains to be seen where she comes out on this long term. And Han Kuo-yu right now already seems to be peaking politically, as we kicked off the show with, and his poll numbers are coming down. So I think that Johnny Chang is looking much more toward how is the party going to maintain enough momentum going to the next election to keep the party from becoming obliterated over the next 2 or 3 cycles.
So you think the no vote appeals to the constituents in central Taiwan who are more conservative? Or did he do it to show solidarity with the rest of his KMT legislative fellows?
Well, I mean, he obviously is the caucus leader on that side. I mean,
Right.
he's just below Wang Jinping.
Right.
I mean, he needs to be, obviously he needs to show party loyalty. But it's worth keeping in mind that, again, he's of the red faction here in Taichung. And so his base and the faction, the factional base is generally rural, center, and South Taiwan.
Yeah.
And so, I think he's tying himself in with the factions. He's representing his district, which is fairly conservative.
Yep.
He's a Fengyuan guy.
Yep.
And so I think he's voting in line with what his constituency would want him to, and also by extension, if he were to, say, step in the shoes of Wang Jinping, he would. Now, Wang Jinping, by the way, abstained. He didn't vote.
That was a very interesting vote.
Yeah, but he's the caucus leader. Also, so that may have played a part. I don't know.
It may also play his presidential ambitions.
Yes.
Wang has.
He may have just. And one thing we know about Wang Jinping is, when asked for an opinion, you won't get one. He will do anything and everything humanly possible to not give you a straight answer.
Yep. That's Wang.
So, what do you think?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you more about Wang.
Oh, all right. Why don't we get to that in a minute, or do we just want to jump straight to that?
We could jump straight into that because we were talking about Wang, and he's a fascinating character who had an enormous hidden influence on the last election, and he's extremely popular especially among older Taiwanese, and very well respected. He's a Taiwanese himself. For years, he's been the unofficial head of Taiwanese within the KMT, the head of the Southern legislators, as they call that crowd, and he's a dark horse presidential candidate. I and some other observers quietly consider him to be a very, very dangerous, very dangerous possibility. The others all have definite weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Zhu Liren already lost an election. Wu Duanyi is still hiding.
Yep.
Han Kuo-yu talks. He just talks. And when you talk a lot, you tend to say stupid things.
Yep.
And I think he's going to talk himself out of a candidacy one of these days.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Who else is in this race? The KMT...
Terry Go?
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about
Guo Taiming,
yeah. The KMT is currently vying with the American Democratic Party to see who can have the most primary candidates in a single global political party primary. So I decided actually I'm going to bet on one, and then I'm going to register as a candidate in that primary to make sure that I win my bet. But Guo Taiming is the dark horse here because Wu Duanyi has brought him in has been cultivating him as a candidate. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not a dark horse. That's the wrong word. He's an interesting newcomer,
Mm-hmm.
and Wu Duanyi has been trying to pull him into the presidential.
Him or Mine Joe? I keep hearing different stories on that.
Well, if you look back from like a year ago, Wu was already extolling him as a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And Guo has been setting himself up by associating himself with the Matsu cult in a couple of circumstances. And the Matsu cult is an important link between China and pro-China forces in Taiwan. It's an important nexus of that. So you've got this set of candidates who are very diverse and who, unfortunately, who are all weak and who lack broad popularity. And then there's Wang, who's quietly popular and quietly respected. And people will remember that it was Wang who protected the sunflowers.
Yep.
They can be reminded of that when they were occupying the legislature. People will remember that it was Wang who was opposed to Ma Ying-jeou. People will remember that when Wang ran against Ma Ying-jeou for chairmanship of the KMT many years ago.
2005.
Yep, 2005. Wang was supported by all the party elites and Ma was supported by the party rank and file. So quietly, very quietly, Wang Jinping is a very viable presidential candidate if, and that's the question. Because there's another one out there, Wu Duanyi, who also wants to be president.
Yeah. All right. Well, how about you explain Wu Duanyi's path to the presidency?
Wu Duanyi's path to the presidency. Let's see. Wait a second. We have to consult our crystal ball. Crystal ball. How can Wu Duanyi become president? How can Wu Duanyi become president? Well, first of all, Han Guoyu's got to talk himself out of a job. And then Guo Taimin, who's also said some things that are not very popular, and who is going to be associated in people's minds with Trump's resounding success in his presidency of the United States. Businessmen don't do well as presidents, and people know that. And then Zhu Liren, I know there's no need to discuss him, he's going to fade. Who else is running? Isn't Zhou Xiwei running
yeah,
too?
Zhou Xiwei running, yeah.
So you've got a bunch of people who don't have any name, and then there's Wu Duanyi who's sitting behind all this. And when all these people fail, Wu can step forward. The interesting question for me that you and I were discussing before we talk about this was, I need to consult my opium pipe here. Thank you. Will Wang Jinping support Wu Duanyi with his factional networks if Wu decides to go for the presidency? Oh, you need to do something too. What do you think? The crystal ball says nothing.
All right, here's what I think. I've been thinking for a long time, and I think you've thought something similar, that Wu Duanyi is the party chair, and historically the party chair is the presumptive candidate,
the presumptive candidate
for the party. That's been the rule since, since Chiang Kai-shek was herding cows. Which I don't recall him ever.
Chiang Kai-shek herding cows? Wait a second. I need a drink to handle that comment.
But since forever is where I'm going with this. And when that custom was first broken was actually in the last election, when Hong Xiuju ran, and Eric Chu decided he didn't want to run, and he stepped back and didn't run the primary. Hong Xiuju won the primary. She went out there. She was clearly a disastrous candidate. But what they weren't seeing was that really the problem was the KMT in that electoral cycle, which I think Eric Chu figured out early on, and that's why he didn't want to run.
Right.
So, but of course, push came to shove. The party broke several of its own rules and kicked Hong Xiuju out, and stuck in the party chair. So I think the presumptive path for Wu Duanyi is if Han Guoyu becomes, or somebody else, the other possibility being Terry Gou at this point would be the two. I'm thinking he's thinking one of these two. Because when he ran for party chair, and we know he's ambitious.
Yes.
He's already been premier and vice president, and he's been wanting this job for a long time.
Right.
And we know he's acceptable to the party elites.
Yep.
He's a protege of Ma Ying-jeou for a gazillion years.
He was the one who kept the KMT in
prepared.
control. Yep.
He's ready for the job, and we know he wants it, and that's why he ran for the party chair. And of course, it was obvious from the polling early on, before the primary season even started, that it wasn't doable. So the only way that he could jump in, I think, with Wu Duanyi, and I suspect this is where you were going with it, is whoever wins the primary implodes. And then the party calls on the party chair because it's too late to hold another primary.
Exactly.
That's what you're thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking somehow. Or else there's a primary and nobody wins. Everyone has like 15%. And then Wu can step in and say, look, I got to do this. I can unite this party.
Yeah.
That's a very viable scenario. The other thing is, Wang Jinping could step up and say, I can unite this party. And then you have disunity, but at a more fundamental level. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with the KMT.
So here's the path, the possible path for Wang Jinping to the presidency. And this is a little bit more controversial. So,
Okay.
All right.
Am I going to need a drink for this?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you.
So, I don't think this is likely, but it's possible. Okay. At this point, because we know the primary is going to be held, the opinion polls by late June. Okay, so that's when they're actually going to do the public opinion polling.
Right.
So, right now, the way the polling is, Han Kuo-yu's up on top, Terry Guo is just below. Han Kuo-yu used to be way ahead, now the gap is narrowing, but the trend line seems to be Terry Guo is going up, and Han Kuo-yu is coming down.
Okay.
So, now, so if these trend lines were to continue, Han Kuo-yu, he falls below Terry Guo, then Terry Guo wins it. That's sort of what a lot of people are thinking right now. However, this is what I'd like to point out. Han Kuo-yu, first of all, may or may not, and this is what we don't know at this point, is he may have a floor. So what I'm watching right now is while I think he's peaked in terms of his public opinion, my question at this point is whether or not he has a floor. If he has a hardcore floor of people who absolutely are passionate for him, they will follow him through thick and thin, then he's still got a path to the presidency, if it's a large enough base. If it isn't, and the bottom's falling out on him, then he's dead meat. So right now I'm still watching to see whether this is the case. I mean, here in Taichung, the building super, he has a sticker of Han Kuo-yu on his phone.
I'm going with floor on that one, definitely.
There's a lot of people who are absolutely passionate about him, and they personally committed themselves to their friends, to their family, and they're so deeply into the Han Kuo-yu phenomenon that's going to be very hard for them to extricate it, emotionally, socially, and so on and so forth. The question isn't, I think, whether or not it exists. The question is, how far and will that go down?
Yeah.
Where is that for? So I just don't know. So now we're talking about a potential path here for Wang Jinping. I think that actually Han Kuo-yu is a better candidate than Terry Guo.
I would agree with that.
Sorry, his English name is Terry Go. He's Guo Timing. I think that of all the candidates, Terry Go is the worst candidate by a long shot.
Yes.
He is totally uncharismatic.
Yes.
He's arrogant.
Yes.
Thin-skinned.
Yes.
He comes across as a nasty boss.
Yes.
Which he is. He's famously authoritarian.
Yes.
He periodically has in the past come out with statements which sound like he's very iffy on the whole concept of democracy.
Yes.
He's blatantly pro-ROC and China.
Yes.
He's financially deeply in debt to the Communist Party of China.
Yes.
And not only that, he would not have been anywhere near as successful as he would have been without doing two things. One is he hollowed out the industrial base here in Taiwan in the 80s and 90s. He was a leader in doing exactly that.
Yeah.
He moved the shoe industry, for example. Well, he didn't move the shoe industry, but he led the way for example, the shoe industry and a lot of these other industries to leave Taichung. He was kind of the trailblazer of moving manufacturing into China.
And
the second thing...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go. The second thing.
The second thing is that he would not have been able to succeed as well as he's done and continued to prosper in China without being deeply in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. We've seen recently, like Jack Ma stepping down. We've seen a lot of big billionaires and very successful business people in China recently have been pushed aside, jailed, retired. If you're not completely 100% in with the CCP the way they want you to be, you're going nowhere in China if you're going to operate on that kind of scale.
Right.
So I think that basically Terry Go is toxic, and I don't see him surviving that long. However, The question mark is whether or not he can maintain his current position in the polling if Han Kuo-yu keeps coming down through from now to the end of June. And that's the big question mark. Right now, Terry Go's doing okay, and he's actually coming up in the polls. So the question mark is, will he peak before or after the opinion polls that determine the primary for the KMT in late June? That is the big question mark with Terry Kuo. So, where does this leave Wang Jinping? Where I was starting with this is, if Han Kuo-yu starts coming down, if Terry Kuo starts coming down, and these are both ifs at this point, I want to emphasize that.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen between now and then, but the thing is if these two start happening, the supporters of both of these two candidates are not your typical KMT supporters. A lot of them are not. Some of them are, but a lot of them are hankering for something different.
Right.
Now,
okay.
These people, if they if they bolt both Han Kuo-yu and Terry Go, where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Eric Chu? Some of them are very pro ROC. Some of them are of that base. Some of them will go to him. But where are the others going to go? In the general election, they'd go to Ke Pi. But Ke Pi will not be on the ballot in the primary in late June. So the question is, if people start to bolt both Han Kuo-yu and Guo Taiming, Terry Go in large numbers by late June, where are they going to go? Who's on the ballot in the KMT primary? And I don't think that they're going to go in majority numbers to Eric Chu or to Zhou Xiwei. I think that they're going to go, the largest bulk will go to Wang Jinping. But in the general, they're more likely to go to Ke Pi. So now you were going to jump in and say something.
Well, I was going to say, the one other knock on, well, never mind, that won't work for the primary. But Wang Jinping's Taiwanese.
Yeah.
And a lot of Han voters, a lot of Han supporters are Taiwanese, who are older Taiwanese, who would prefer Wang to either Zhu or...
Yeah.
They identify with Wang as a Taiwanese.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, too, that Wang's deep factional connections will enable him to mobilize votes.
That doesn't help so much in the primary.
In the primary.
It'll help in the general.
But it will help get the word out about Wang.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you see what I'm saying. So Wang has a lot of hidden advantages, I would say, right now. But anything could happen. The KMT is really going to be a lot of fun this election.
Yeah, and what's going to happen between now and when they start actually conducting the primary polling in late June, that's a month away, or almost, it's a month away, basically. And a lot's going to happen between now and then.
Hong Shou-ju, step in to save the KMT. Please. You can do it. What does the crystal ball say? The crystal ball says it's going to be Udwani. I can't shake the feeling that after everything settles, it's going to be U.
I think that that's what Wu's hoping for. Yeah. I honestly think that right from the get-go, when he decided to openly pull out of running and support Han Kuo-yu, I think both of us, we had a similar response, which was, he's backing Han to for something, and it's not because he thinks that Han Kuo-yu is his guy. Because what we do know for a fact is exactly the opposite, because a big part of the reason, and this is my theory, I don't know what you think about this, I think that the reason why Han Kuo-yu ended up in Kaohsiung in the first place was because he was the obnoxious little twat who had the temerity to run against Wu Duanyi in the chairman's race and came in third, I believe, after and came in with double digits, low double digits, I think. And as his punishment, I think that Wu Duanyi shipped him off down to Kaohsiung, where he thought, it's going to be totally hopeless, you're going to lose. Okay, and took Han Kuo-yu, put him right into the hands of, and who is that wonderful, brilliant Kaohsiung factional Paul,
That would be Wang.
Exactly. Put him right into the hands of Wang Jinping. Wang Jinping, and I think he was the one who won the last election.
Yeah, of course.
And
So you think, so you think Wu's original calculation was that Han would sink Wang as well as Han? But he didn't.
But he would pit them against each other.
But how would they be against each other if Han is the KMT candidate? And Wang came
because Wang is old, and this is his show.
Yeah, this
and
is
so if
his
Han Guoyu runs against him, and this is one of the big reasons.
You mean in the current primary, not in the Kaohsiung election?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking the reason that he got sent down there
in
the original mayor election was that he was going to sink Wang and Han at the same time.
I don't know if he thought that he would sink Wang, because by that point Wang was a party list legislator.
Well,
and he's sort of risen above the Kaohsiung. But
true.
But the interesting thing is that you'll notice in the last final weeks of the election last year, the local elections, when Han Guoyu, the last 2-3 weeks of the elections, if you looked at all the campaign posters, you look at the rallies, Wu Duanyi was nowhere to be seen.
No.
It was 3 people. It was Han Guoyu, it was Hou Youyi, and it was Liu Xiuyan.
Yes.
And the 3 of them all over the place, all over the ads, and then, totally separate, it was Ding Shozhong and Wu Duanyi. They were up in Taipei.
Right.
They were barely leaving Taipei.
No.
And because Wu Duanyi wasn't welcome.
South of Taoyuan, there was no Wu Duanyi.
There was
but
no
Han
Wu Duanyi.
Guoyu was everywhere.
Yes.
I saw him in Miaoli, I saw him in Hsinchu, his picture was everywhere.
Yep. He was peering out from under your bed.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my God, is he under the table here?
So, there was a split in the party in the last election. So you had the factional polls, you had all of this coming together in this hand wave in the last election. Wu Duanyi's kicked out, pushed out, and in the party he was clearly, although he was the chair, Wang Jinping was the one where the momentum and the power in the party had shifted to.
Right.
So Wu Duanyi turning around, doing a complete large number of degree turn.
Pits Han and Wang against each other.
Right. And
in the primary.
Exactly. And that splits the coalition of Wang Jinping and the Han Wave.
Right.
Splits them for influence within the KMT.
Yeah.
And then that shores up Wu Duanyi's position, puts him back in a position of strength as the power broker.
Right.
Not Wang Jinping. So that's why I think he was so keen on getting Han Guoyu. And Han Guoyu, I suspect that he didn't think that he was going to survive all the way to the general, which would mean he'd have to step in.
That's why Han has been so coy, because he himself senses this, I think.
I think so too. And I think that he doesn't want to be disloyal to Wang Jinping.
And also he knows his power base is Kaohsiung, which is Wang's power base.
Right.
So...
And if he runs, he's going to lose the support of Wang Jinping, and the factional polls, that's a serious risk on his part. So he's shooting himself in the foot if he runs, and if he doesn't run.
I think Han's realized that he's been left to dangle in the wind, which is why he's been veering between plaintive noises and vindictive noises for the last couple of weeks.
Yes. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So I think we both agree that Wu had his longer term plans.
Yes.
To stay viable going into, I never bought at all his whole line about, we want Han Guoyu because it's the best thing for the party.
He said that about Guo Taiming too.
Yeah. But he was always a little bit
earlier.
Yeah. Now what's interesting about Guo Taiming is that China seems to be backing him. They originally wanted Han Guoyu, but now I think they're behind him.
They're like him better, yeah.
Yeah, they like him much better.
Well, so speaking of China and international affairs, what happened this week with the Taiwan office in Washington?
That's interesting. Taiwan Council for U.S. Affairs is the new name of the office following Japan's move to change their office here in Taiwan to the Japan-Taiwan Interchange, I think it's called, Association, something like that.
Japan-Taiwan Interchange Association.
Yeah.
It sounds like a highway planning bureau.
It does. But it does have the name Taiwan and Japan in it, and
Beautiful.
it does say they're working together.
Yes.
And the new one is the Taiwan Council for U.S. Affairs, and it has Taiwan in the name. It basically describes what an embassy does. That's what the name of it is. It doesn't say it's the Taiwan Embassy, it's the Taiwan Council for U.S. Affairs. So basically they're saying, we are the entity which does embassy-like things.
Well, the importance of it is clearly that you've got Taiwan and U.S. in the same name.
Yep.
And it shows, as a number of commentators have noted, that Tsai's very quiet, very relaxed, very mellow, and very firm policy is slowly bearing fruit with Taiwan's two most important allies, the U.S. and Japan. And yet, the public doesn't seem to be very aware of all the things that are happening. But, well, they're focused on what's happening in Taiwan more than they would in the outside world, I think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, foreign affairs is not.
Otherwise, Hangoyu would get zero traction.
Yeah, he's not exactly a foreign policy.
You could never vote for Hangoyu if you were thinking about Taiwan's relations with, say, Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't even, that wouldn't even enter your calculation.
No.
And this week also, who met in Washington? I think it was.
It was Bolton met with David Lee, two national security, the heads of the national security agencies of both countries.
Did you think that segue was a little too obvious? I need to work on that, don't I? Yeah.
We need two-wheeled vehicles that stand upright to move more smoothly between topics.
Oh, I need a segue.
Yes,
Wow.
that's what we need.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean this is great news because they've changed it from the Coordination Council for North American Affairs, and right at the same time, the U.S. is signaling not only are they not in any way upset or bothered by Taiwan changing it to the Taiwan Council for U.S. Affairs, putting Taiwan in the name front and center instead of Coordination Council for North American Affairs, which doesn't even have Taipei in the name, never mind Taiwan.
Right.
So the U.S. hasn't complained about that, and then right on the same day, plus or minus 1 or 2 days, Bolton and Lee, both of the heads of the national security agencies of both countries, meet up for the first time since, I believe, diplomatic relations were cut.
Yeah.
So this may be the highest level meeting between the two countries.
Taiwan Travel Act is creating more visits between officials from both sides.
Yeah.
So what we actually need is for the U.S. government to start speaking out and saying, look, just quietly let people know, Taiwan is what we want. If you look at the DPP primary right now, you've got Lai Ching-te, once the mayor of Tainan, then the premier, and now challenging Tsai for the presidential nomination. But Lai has zero foreign policy experience.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did you read, now if you remember, I mean, back in 2012, when the U.S. used some State Department people to say some things that kind of made it sound like the U.S. government was not for Tsai.
Right.
Now, did you notice recently that there was, right around the time that Lai started to ramp up his challenge, there was, I believe, 3 think tanks, major think tanks, Heritage and a couple of others, had that live feed interview with Tsai Ing-wen.
Right.
And then John, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, it was a lot of consonants. The T8, how do you pronounce it?
Tasic?
Tasic?
Yes.
And he wrote that, and he's an ex-State Department official, wrote this absolutely glowing description of Tsai's job diplomatically with the United States, and it went on at length about how much the American government, how much American diplomats appreciate her approach.
Right.
I felt like they were signaling. That they were signaling that they were supporting Tsai. That was my feeling.
The problem is not that maybe they were signaling, although Tasic is a long-term supporter of Taiwan. So.
But he was very specific. It was her.
Yeah, but the problem is that they're not signaling in Chinese. They're signaling in English. And we need Chinese-speaking people like from American organizations here to get in front of a camera and say, look, the U.S. really prefers Tsai, and that's the way it is. Her quiet, stable, steady approach is the kind of thing that we want. And that would help Tsai in the primary. But
I don't think they can politically come out and say
they can't,
directly.
They can't say that directly, but it can be signaled in many ways.
Yeah.
And
so they can't exactly come out and go, 我嚟講嗬，蔡英文，
干杯!
So, I mean, I think, obviously, a lot of these things, the change of the name and all of this stuff, obviously, Tsai Ing-wen, she's soft-spoken, she's a diplomat.
She's a
That's
class
her background.
act. She's a class act.
Yes, and her background is diplomacy.
Yes.
Now, something that people keep saying, and I think you could shed a lot of light on this, is a lot of people keep saying that if you choose Lai Ching-te, William Lai, as the candidate for the DPP, that he would be much stronger on Taiwan sovereignty issues, and he'd be more Tai-do, more pro-Republic of Taiwan,
Oh my God.
this kind of thing. This is what people keep saying, but I'm not seeing it. Can you bring some context to this?
Well, I would argue that it doesn't matter because Lai is going to be constrained by the same set of factors that Tsai Ing-wen is currently constrained by, right? The U.S. position on Taiwan, the fact that China's power is growing, there's not a lot of space for Taiwan to operate in the world. Where people keep saying, oh, Tsai hasn't done this. Well, there's no space for Tsai to do those things. And when Lai becomes president, he will encounter the same problems. My take on it, and it has been since the first group of old males broke away and said, we want to found the new constitution group, the 1 millionth splinter group in the independence movement, was that these are a bunch of old guys who don't like having a woman having power. And at least one of the major problems here is sexism. And they like Lai.
Yeah, they do.
And
no, I think you're absolutely correct. There's another thing is one of them said specifically.
You got that out, right? Go ahead.
One of them specifically questioned, women or people in skirts in power, I believe is one quote.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that running around.
But here's a theory I have, and actually your background, you'd know this better than I would. I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of these older, what they used to call the Taiwan independence movement guys.
Yeah.
I have this sneaking suspicion that they've reached a point in their life where they've reached an age where they just want to see it happen before they go.
Yeah.
And
a lot of
they don't really care anymore about what the current circumstances are or what it does for the rest of us who still have some time left to live.
I think a lot of those old guys have been struggling their whole life.
Yes.
And remember, for them, we're living in the post-independence generation, right? So for the young, Taiwan is already independent. The problem is getting that independence recognized by everyone else.
Yeah.
But for that generation, the older guys, independence meant getting rid of the KMT and getting rid of Taiwan's colonial status as a KMT holding. So you actually have this, and Tsai is from the next generation. So you've got the sexism thing, you've got the generational clash, and you've got these old guys who have spent the last 50 years fighting amongst themselves. Because I used to work for one of those organizations when I lived in Washington. And it was very disillusioning for a young, idealistic man like myself. I'm still young, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, so I think what's going on here is that. And I've noticed that I gave a presentation a couple of years ago to one of these groups. And a lot of them are really old. And they were like, when are we going to see Taiwan independence? And I told them bluntly, you and I are all going to die, and we will not see an independent Taiwan. This is what we are going to give our grandchildren. We will never see it ourselves.
And there's no Santa.
But there's a reindeer here. Let me consult the crystal ball. Will we see Taiwan in our lifetimes? It didn't see its shadow. Just remember this. Taiwan has never been part of China.
That's correct. So, all right. So, yeah. No, I mean, I think you're spot on there. I mean, these guys, you know, and I kind of feel sorry for them because I know that this is their lifelong dream, and for them to pass without seeing it is sad. But realistically, even Lai Ching-te came out recently and he said, you know, again, he reiterated it. Taiwan is an independent country with the name Republic of China.
That's the official DPP position.
Yes, and that's exactly Tsai Ing-wen's position.
Yes.
He's not saying anything Tsai Ing-wen is not.
Exactly.
So, in terms of him being more muscular or whatever, I think what they may mean is that he'd be a little bit more masculine in his approach.
That's the right set of genitals. That's what they mean.
Yeah, I don't see him substantively being more inclined to create a Republic of Taiwan, or
he can't. How is he going to do that? It's not possible. At this juncture, it's not possible.
Well, it is, but it would be suicidal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, listen. We've gone a whole hour without seeing Han Guoyu, and I'm suffering from withdrawal.
Oh, okay. All right. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? We need to bring back Han Guoyu because, of course, you cannot live without Han Guoyu at least once every 10 minutes on the news.
Thank you for watching our show tonight. This is going to be the first of the series, and we hope to see you next week when we're slightly more professional.
Hopefully you'll be back.